Today, we're going into a case that has become iconic in the debate about police and the use of force in America. The shooting death of Daniel Shaver in a hotel hallway in Mesa, Arizona. This isn't a sensational video. This is a lesson in human psychology, how stress, fear, and error, perception can lead to a trigger pull, and how the law judges that trigger pull. The goal of this long video is 4 parts. First, to summarize the context and ask the right questions. Second, to dissect the 90-second hallway, each command, each action, each psychological breakpoint. Third, to go through the legal and court proceedings, why the prosecution was successful, and why the jury acquitted. Fourth, the consequences, civil settlements, federal investigations, policy changes, and the psychological scars for everyone involved. On January 18, 2016, at the La Quinta Inn and Suites Mesa Superstition, Springs in Mesa, Arizona, Daniel Shaver, 26 years old, from Granbury, Texas, was shot and killed in the hotel hallway by Officer Philip Mitchell Brailsford of the Mesa Police Department. Forensic evidence, autopsy, and toxicology from the Maricopa County Office of the Medical Examiner determined the cause of death to be multiple gunshot wounds. The manner of death, was homicide. Toxicology tests revealed ethanol 0.29 g%, vitreous, and 0.27 g% blood in the pleural cavity, and did not detect many common drug groups saw drugs on the screening list. Criminally, the county prosecutor filed a direct complaint alleging second-degree murder, Class 1 felony, and citing the aggravating circumstance of a rifle deadly weapon. The charges cited laws including ARS, Sections 13, 1101, 13, 1104, 13, 710, 13, 701, 13, 702, 13, 821, and the dangerous circumstances under ARS Sections 13, 105, 13, 704. The trial concluded with a not guilty verdict for Philip Mitchell Brailsford. Shortly afterward, body cam video, described as disturbing graphic, was widely released, causing a strong social backlash. The central analysis of this report is that a complex conflicting chain of commands, in a context of extreme stress, can push both citizens and police into predictable psychological mechanisms. Prefrontal cortex, PFC, processing capacity under stress, tunnel vision, tunnel hearing, working memory, overload, and compliance failure due to distorted perception, all of which can turn a manageable situation into a deadly one. The Daniel Shaver case, psychological anatomy in 90 seconds in the hallway and legal consequences, assumption. Each segment is approximately 10 seconds long, based on the order of events in the federal ruling and press descriptions. The federal ruling states that the person who issued the chain of orders was Charles Langley. Some news reports, CBS AP, attribute the voice in the video to Brailsford. To maintain objectivity, this report prioritizes court records when identifying the speaker, while also noting discrepancies in news reports. We arrive at the two-sided psychological analysis leading to the outcome. The victim's likely cognitive-emotional state, Shaver, from federal records describing the victim crying, pleading, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, yes sir," and being forbidden to speak to ask questions, we have a psychological picture consistent with acute stress, fear of death, effort to obey orders, But, and the key scientific mechanism, acute stress impairs the executive function of the prefrontal cortex, PFC, reducing the ability to maintain rules of the game in working memory and to switch smoothly between requests. Acute alcohol impairs executive and coordination function, increasing the probability of small motor errors at times when no errors are allowed. Therefore, reaching back to pull up pants may be a natural reflex, not necessarily an intention to threaten. Federal records clearly state that the short slipped down and the victim reached back. The cognitive emotional state of the police. From the perspective of an officer carrying a rifle and in a potentially armed situation, the brain easily switches to a threat pattern, looking for signs of drawing a gun. At this point, decisions are often based on rapid pattern recognition in a very short time, and may be accompanied by auditory distortion, tunnel vision, time distortion, auditory exclusion. Local news sources and analyses describe the argument that pulling down pants looks like drawing a gun. Even a former officer interviewed by 12 News said he might react similarly because he had seen someone in that position draw a gun. The intersection of the two mechanisms, the more panicked, confused party A, the victim is, the more likely they are to make an unplanned action. The more vigilant party B, the police officer, is about the gun drawing pattern, the more likely they are to interpret the unplanned action as drawing a gun. In behavioral science, this is a feedback loop of fear and threat interpretation. It doesn't require the assumption of malice to lead to deadly consequences. Other options that could reduce risk, independent sources have directly cited an alternative: handcuffing the victim while they are on the floor. Instead of issuing a series of risky crawl-kneel commands, CBS AP reported that investigators noted nothing prevented handcuffing while the victim was on the floor. At the best practice level, policy documents emphasize the principle of creating time and distance to reduce the need for a 5-second decision, a logic that Mesa PD himself later referenced in tactical cha-cha training changes, albeit in a different context. Furthermore, a police-related shooting review project conducted by Arizona State University for Mesa PD in 2022 indicated that noisy and chaotic situations, along with repeated and/or conflicting commands, can cause fear and confusion, especially in individuals exhibiting signs of intoxication, drug use, or stress. A point of principle when revisiting the Daniel Shaver situation. And we have ASU's possible alternatives in the hotel hallway could include 1. Maintaining cover, designating one person to give short, clear, non-threatening commands. 2. Having the victim stand still, i.e. walk backward with arms raised, less mechanically conflicting than crawling without lowering arms. 3. Deploying at least one less lethal vehicle. 4. Using time and distance to reduce 1-second decision-making. These assumptions align with the de-escalation principle in the Mesa PD policy of slowing down the situation and potentially retreating to a safer position to explore more options. The direct complaint at Maricopa County Superior Court, signed by Susie Charbel of MCAO, states, Count 1, second-degree murder, Class 1 felony, dangerous, against Philip Mitchell Brailsford, and cites several ARS provisions, including ARS 13-11-4, second-degree murder, and related provisions on the definition, punishment framework, dangerous nature. Regarding the sentencing framework, ARS 13-7 and 10 stipulates the sentence for second-degree murder, excluding other exceptions, with a minimum of 10 years, a presumptive sentence of 16 years, and a maximum of 25 years. Regarding justification burden, ARS Section 13-205 states that if the defendant presents evidence of a legitimate defense under Chapter 4, the prosecution must demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not act in a justified state. Meanwhile, ARS Section 13-410 establishes the framework for the use, threatening of deadly force by a peace officer, when that officer reasonably believes there is imminent use of deadly physical force or circumstances listed by law. In parallel, in disputes involving the use of force, federal precedents are frequently cited. Graham v. Connor, 1989, assesses reasonableness from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene and takes into account the fact that decisions are made in tense, imperfect situations. Tennessee v. Garner, 1985. Deadly force should not be used unless necessary, and there is probable cause that the suspect poses a serious threat of death or serious harm. Criminal proceedings. Timeline and video sealing issues. According to ABC 15, a judge, Sam Myers, decided to release a portion of the body cam video after the preliminary hearing. The full video at that stage was said to be about 18 minutes long and contained 2 body cams and would be partially redacted. After the trial, the press described the previously sealed to the public video as having been released unsealed after the verdict. In 2017, the jury found the defendant not guilty of second-degree murder and not guilty of reckless manslaughter. Key evidence and prosecution. Defense arguments. Hard evidence. Forensic evidence confirmed multiple gunshot wounds, injury lines, and ethanol levels. Description from federal records of the sequence of actions and commands. Pants falling down, reaching behind, firing 5 shots. No gun was found on the victim. There were pellet rifles in the room. The key to the initial misjudgment of weapon type. Defense arguments, summarized from press sources, son expert opinions. The victim's movement resembled drawing a gun from their waistband. The reaction time was extremely short. The officer was certain they saw the threatening behavior. The reasonable officer argument is also reflected in interviews with police experts, former officers, who stated they might have reacted similarly because they saw someone in that position drawing a weapon. Prosecution arguments, summarized from press sources' files, the victim may have simply been pulling down their shorts. They did not have a gun on them. There were less risky options such as handcuffing the victim while they were on the floor. The sequence of commands was confusing. Controversial evidence and the inadmissible issue. Courthouse News Service reported that the AR-15 used in the case had the phrase, "You're fucked," engraved on it, and the judge dismissed this evidence from the trial as inadmissible. The ACLU also mentioned this engraving to argue against the culture of violence. Why was the jury acquitted? There is no official explanation from the jury in the primary sources cited in this report. Therefore, the following is conditional inference based on 1. The Arizona law standard of justification, 2. The content of the debate recorded in the press, and 3. The reasonable officer framework in federal case law. Factors that could create reasonable doubt. The judging standard strongly favors reasonable perception at the scene, Graham, rather than post-trial, after knowing the victim was unarmed. The burden of proof for the prosecution. If the defense presents a justification framework, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was not justified, ARS 13-205. A very high threshold in the context of hand movements described as resembling drawing a gun. The ambiguity of the movement. The same movement with the hand towards the waistband, could be interpreted as drawing a gun or pulling up pants. The press noted that even investigators believed it resembled both drawing a gun and pulling up pants. The impact of stress on perception. The science of perceptual distortion during shooting makes it easier to misinterpret the movement in an instant, thus making it difficult for the jury to conclude unreasonable. Comparison of evidence and testimony. On the night of January 18, 2016, police received a call about someone pointing a gun out the hotel window. This was the first psychological priming point. When initial information is linked to a weapon, the human brain, especially the brain in a protective role, will prioritize the worst-case scenario. Inside the room, sources reported that it involved a work-related air pellet gun. But the important thing is, in the hallway, at the time the order was given, police believed they were dealing with a situation involving a weapon. Second priming point. The victim has very high ethanol levels. This isn't guilty, but it can impair working memory and the ability to process multi-conditioned commands. When combined with near-death stress, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps us plan and self-control, can decline rapidly. Assumptions for analysis. 90 seconds before the gunfire. In the video narration, you hear a sequence of commands like, look down at the mat,
You do that again, we're
clasp
shooting
your
you,
hands
you
behind your
understand?
head, cross your legs, stay silent,
For one
and
thing,
if
did
you
I tell
move, you
to
might
move,
not
young man?
survive.
Did I tell you to
Here, the
put
power
both your
structure is
hands-
very clear.
Put both your hands on the
Compliance,
top of your head
Boxer's
and
life,
interlace your fingers.
error, or death.
Take your feet
The problem
and cross
is,
your left foot
crawl
over your right foot.
is biologically almost mandatory to keep your hands down. So if you're simultaneously threatening to shoot
You
when
are
your
to keep
hands
your
are down
legs
and
crossed. Do you
ordering someone to
understand me?
crawl,
You
you're
are
putting
to
them in a
put
situation
both of
where
your
they're
hands
prone to
palms
making mistakes.
down, straight out
When the
in
brain
front of
is
you.
stressed, the
Push
PFC
yourself
is
up to a
weakened,
kneeling position.
making it even harder to
I
debunk
said,
the
keep your
command
legs
sequence.
crossed.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. These were the words Daniel Shaver uttered while crying and begging not to shoot. This is a manifestation of an overloaded nervous system. Instead of resisting, the body chooses to survive by calming the gunman. Yes, sir.
I
I'm
didn't say
sorry.
it's a conversation.
But what
Keep
does
your hands
overloaded mean?
Hands up in the
It's
air.
not weakness. It means the brain no longer has enough bandwidth to maintain multiple rules simultaneously.
Sorry.
Alcohol further reduces that
Young man,
ability.
you're not to move. You're to put your eyes down.
From the
and look
police
down at the
perspective, officer-involved shooting documents describe tunnel vision, tunnel hearing, heavily focused on the threat and filtering out the rest of the world. In realistic simulations, these perceptual distortions appear alongside a very high heart rate. Therefore, a hand reaching for the waist could be interpreted as drawing a gun, especially when the initial scene was reported to be armed. From a constitutional legal standpoint, the United States Supreme Court itself has stated that reason must be viewed from the perspective of an officer at the scene, not from hindsight. The investigator said it looked like both drawing a gun and pulling down pants, and nothing prevented the handcuffs from being put on. Therefore, a movement of reaching for the waist could be interpreted as drawing a gun, especially when the initial scene was reported to have a weapon. From a constitutional legal standpoint, the United States Supreme Court itself stated that reasonableness must be viewed from the perspective of an officer at the scene, not from hindsight. This is the most painful point of the case. The same movement could be drawing a gun or pulling down pants. The investigator, according to the account, said both seemed reasonable. And it is that ambiguity that is where psychology and law clash. Excerpt from the introduction. The district attorney prosecuted second-degree murder, specifying it as a Class 1 felony dangerous. The document cites Arizona laws relating to the elements of the crime and the sentencing guidelines. Page. Direct complaint lists. Count 1 and related laws. Justification introduced. State must disprove beyond reasonable doubt. Arizona law stipulates, if a defendant presents evidence of justification under Chapter 4, the state must prove beyond reasonable doubt that the act was not justified. This is a procedural slope. The prosecution must climb the evidence and arguments to refute the defendant's reasonable belief. Constitutional standard. Introduction. In cases of excessive force, the Graham standard emphasizes the reasonable officer on the scene and acknowledges that police officers sometimes have to make split-second decisions. This standard explains why many cases that cause public outrage still struggle to be criminally convicted. Unpleasant does not equate to beyond reasonable doubt. DOJ requested all records, will comply. After the video was released and public pressure increased, DOJ subpoenaed files for civil rights investigation. Below are documents. Mesa PD said it would provide documents. Fed subpoena. Mesa, Arizona, police in fatal shooting. The Department of Justice has subpoenaed records from the Mesa Police Department for a civil rights investigation of a former officer who shot an unarmed man to death as he crawled along the floor at an Arizona hotel in 2016. Jamie Ross, March 9, 2018. Phoenix, CN. The Department of Justice has subpoenaed records from the Mesa Police Department for a civil rights investigation of a former officer who shot an unarmed man to death as he crawled along the floor at an Arizona hotel in 2016. The Mesa Police Department said Thursday night that the Department of Justice has requested all of its records on the fatal shooting of Daniel Shaver. We will comply and provide any records requested, the police department said in a statement. Mesa police officer Philip Mitch Brailsford killed Daniel Shaver, 26, at a La Quinta Inn and Suites in Mesa on Yan. 18, 2016. Brailsford was fired 2 months later, and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office charged him with second-degree murder. The nearly 3-month trial last year and hinged on Brailsford's argument that the shooting was justified. Brailsford claimed he saw Shaver reach toward the waistband of his basketball shorts and thought he was armed, and that he responded according to his training at the police academy. The shooting came amid national calls for law enforcement agencies to end deadly use of force tactics, but not gain much attention until after Brailsford was acquitted of second-degree murder on Decorn 7 last year. Immediately after the accusation, body camera footage of the shooting was made public for the first time, prompting cries for a civil rights investigation by the Department of Justice. The body cam footage shows Shaver leaving his hotel room and entering the hallway in a t-shirt and basketball shorts. He faced 6 police officers and was forced to lie on the ground, cross his feet, and put his hands on his head. Then he was told to crawl toward the officers. In the footage, Shaver can be heard crying and pleading to officers, "Please, don't shoot." Brailsford shot Shaver 5 times with his AR-15 rifle. The prosecution said Shaver was merely trying to pull up his basketball shorts as he crawled on the floor. Police had been called after a couple in the hotel jacuzzi said they saw Shaver handling a rifle in his room. Shaver, of Granbury, Texas, had 2 pellet guns in his hotel room to use for his job in pest control. No gun was found on his body. As a reminder, the Mesa Police Department terminated Philip Mitchell Brailsford in March 2016 and cooperated with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office to pursue second-degree murder charges against Mr. Brailsford, Mesa Police said in the statement. Brailsford was fired after an internal investigation found his AR-15 used in the shooting was etched with the words, "You're fucked." That evidence was not entered into the trial last year after a judge found it inadmissible. Shaver was a father of two. His widow, Lainey Sweet, and his parents, Norma and Grady Shaver, have sued Brailsford and the Mesa Police Department for wrongful death and civil rights violations. The suit is pending in Phoenix Federal Court. Regarding civil matters, there are two major settlement milestones: $1.5 million for the victim's parents and $8 million for the wife and children, according to agency notices reports. It is noteworthy that the policy documents themselves emphasize de-escalation, gathering information, assessing risks, coordinating, and possibly withdrawing to a safe position to broaden force options. Keywords like time and distance appear in later reform narratives. If I had to sum up the Daniel Shaver case in one sentence, I would say, sometimes tragedy doesn't need maliciousness, just a narrow hallway, a gunfire call, a drunk and panicked person, a series of impossible commands, and human brains pushed to the limit by stress. And the final question isn't just who's right and who's wrong. The question is, what system, what training, what command language can reduce the probability that the next 90 seconds won't repeat itself?